Thank you for showing up, guys. We definitely appreciate it. ArcSite is a valuable tool that I'm sure you folks will be able to have a lot of uses for. But this webinar is designed for people who are just brand new to the program. They're just getting started and they need kind of a friendly face to, or just an introduction to the program so they can see what it's capable of and really how to use it. So my name is Noah Lance. I am ArcSite's account executive. I'm sitting here with Julia Schroeder. She is one of our sales development representatives. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Julia will answer those right away if she can. Otherwise, she'll pass that information along to me and I can address it live. Yeah, so I'm over here to the left. That is Julia over there to the right. So we are definitely here to work with you folks and make you successful in using the tool. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the program itself. All right, and Julia, you guys should all be able to see my iPad here. I am working from home, as you might imagine, with the coronavirus. So I'm going to share my video here real briefly. But everything I'm going to be doing today, I'm going to be doing on this iPad. So I know you're probably looking at this from a desktop or maybe even an iPad of your own. But everything I'm going to be doing today, I'm just going to be using my fingers to draw. I'm not going to be using a stylus or mouse or keyboard or anything like that. ArcSite is designed to be easy to use on the go. So you can be walking around someone's house or around a site you're doing an inspection on and very easily and accurately creating a professional CAD design on the go. So just to help orient you with what you're looking at on the screen, this is the ArcSite canvas, is what I refer to it as. So at the top of your screen, you're going to see a ruler going from left to right, 0 to 60 feet in this case. There's another one going from top to bottom that has a similar type scale on it. So in ArcSite, you can draw things that are really small or really tiny. These rulers are just here to give you a sense of scale. So I can zoom in. I'm doing this just by placing 2 fingers on the screen and spreading them. So I can do that to draw things that are really small, for instance. Or if I zoom out, I can actually draw things that are really incredibly large. So I could draw a whole city, for instance. Maybe these could represent rooftops. Or I could mark over a map to maybe indicate some type of structure. Now, your first time stepping into the program, there's a couple things to kind of be cognizant of. First off, if you want to draw any lines, there is a draw tool over here to the right. There's 4 different drawing modes. You have continuous mode, segment mode, freehand mode, and rectangle draw mode there at the bottom. So just to give you a brief overview of how all these function, continuous mode at the top is really designed for folks who want to quickly create a drawing on the go, and the scale isn't really too important there. So you can just kind of put your finger on the drawing and then draw different verticals, different lines, arcs, just kind of by moving your finger around. So that is what continuous mode is designed for. Segment mode, if you're a beginner to ArcSite, this is really what I'd recommend focusing on mastering. Segment mode lets you draw one line with great precision just by placing your finger on the screen and dragging it somewhere else. So anytime you draw a line, I'm just placing my finger on the screen here real slow, you're going to see a distance measurement pop up at the very top. So in ArcSite, everything has a sense of scale associated with it. In fact, as long as you stick to segment, continuous, or rectangle draw mode, you actually can't draw out of scale. That's a huge appeal of the program. Now, after you draw a line like this, there's a lot that you can do actually. So first off, there is a distance measurement right here. It says 26 feet. And then at the bottom, there's one here. This is an angle indicator. That right now says 0 degrees because of course this line is flat. Now, if you want to change any of these, all you have to do is just tap on the associated number, and then you can enter in a different dimension. So let's say for this line, we actually want it to be 35 feet long. Well, I can just type that in on the number pad. That line is going to grow accordingly, so it is still to scale. So if you're a contractor, let's say, and you are, let's say, drawing up a floor plan or maybe a proposed scope of work, what you first want to do is take the measurements, actually like with your measuring tape or measure wheel, draw a line, and then you can tap on this dimension to input in what the actual dimension is. And it's very useful because sometimes drawing these lines with your finger, you can't always get it exactly where you want. So being able to tap there and change the distance just by manual input is pretty important. Now, of course, the same thing works with angles. So there's the angle indicator right there. If I want to have an angle going up or down, I can type that in here. So I can have like a 45-degree angle going up. Once I hit this green checkbox, that line is going to adjust to that angle accordingly. So that is how you draw a line. Let's talk about how you draw an arc. To draw an arc, place your finger on the screen and then kind of in an exaggerated U motion, you can actually draw the arc that way. So that's how you draw lines and arcs in the program. Now, as far as what you can do with all these, there really is quite a bit. There is a select tool above draw. And then there are two different select modes, box select and free select. For the sake of this example, either of these are just fine. But when you select a line, it's going to bring up the select menu. So these are all visual buttons that kind of appear on screen after you've selected the line. There's about, I think, 6 different buttons here. First off, the one to the right allows you to rotate the selected object. The center one lets you move it, of course, it's pretty self-explanatory. And this bottom one allows you to duplicate the object. So if I select this, drag my finger away, it's going to create a duplicated version of that line. To the left, there is a mirror object button. So if you select this and then move your finger away, that's going to create a duplicated mirrored version of the selected object. Now there's actually 2 more buttons here. There is one to the left and right. These are represented by the little orange triangles, or rectangles rather. These are called control points. And if you tap these and then move your finger around, you can actually change the distance of the line or even the angle of it manually just by dragging your finger around the screen. Now, that's not as precise as manually inputting in a dimension. So unless you're drawing something that doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, I would recommend not using the control points, and instead using the manual entry method to change dimensions or angles. Now, if you select an arc, you're going to have all the same options that you had when you selected a line. So you have move, rotate, duplicate, and mirror. Now you're going to notice that there is a 3rd control point on the arc. That controls the depth of the arc. So I can kind of move this around like a wet noodle and change the pitch of it. This is very useful for drawing free-form curves accurately. So for instance, if I draw a series of segments like so, I can select each one of these and then change exactly how that line is situated to change the free-form curve as required. Then if I want to get real fancy, I might even move some of these arcs away from each other and put in a different one, and then select it and kind of tweak it a little bit until I get the exact curve I'm kind of looking for. I would consider this more of an advanced workflow, so don't get too hung up on it, but these are all things you can do with the program. I'm going to select all the stuff using box select and delete it on the left. Now, one of the things that's really important that you can do in ArcSite that isn't immediately apparent is you can permanently show these dimensions on screen. Obviously, if I kind of click away from the line, I can't see how long it is, right? So depending on your use case, you might want that information to be readily apparent on an export piece like a PDF or PNG. So by selecting these lines, you can go to the More button on the left and then click Show Dimensions. That'll bring those dimensions on screen. So just at a glance, you can see how long or short these lines are. Now, if you have a lot of lines or walls on your drawing, you might notice that these dimensions pop in and maybe they hide something or cover something up. You can actually select these dimensions and move them around to get them out of the way of other objects. Or if it's a superfluous dimension and you want to get rid of it, after you select it, you can click the Delete button over here to get rid of that selected object. Now, let's say you want to draw a special type of line that indicates maybe something of importance or maybe a certain type of object that you're drawing. You can draw in different colors. Now, to draw in different colors and line types, just select Draw. And then at the bottom, there's going to be a little box here. It might be filled with a black color or it might be filled with a different one. Just click on that. That's going to bring up the color and styles menu. This is where you can select what type of line you want to draw. So there is a line weight here. I can turn that up or down. That's going to change the thickness of the line. So let's turn this all the way up to demonstrate. It's up to 20, which is the largest you can get. That's going to draw a really thick black line. Now, if I want to, let's change that back to 3. I can also draw in different line types. So I could do like a dashed line, for instance, maybe a dotted line, or even a dot dash line. Now, one cool thing you can do with lines, guys, is you can actually attach arrows at either end. So at the very bottom here, there is an arrow button for start or end. Let's turn one of these on to kind of show you how those work. I'm going to turn the end one on. So I might be able to point at something if you turn the end arrow on, for instance, right? So kind of a cool little thing you can do. Quickly of note here, 2 things. There's a transparency button here at the top. It lets you change how transparent the line is as you imagine. If you turn this all the way up to 100% and leave it there, if you draw anything on the screen, it's going to completely disappear. You're going to wonder why nothing draws. So if you notice that's an issue you're having, just make sure you have transparency turned down, and that should address that problem. It looks like there is a bit of lag here between what I'm saying and what you folks are seeing on screen. Apologize for that. So if you have transparency turned up all the way, nothing will draw. Make sure you have that turned down. Kind of another thing to remember is that the standard line weight in ArcSite is 3. So if you notice that your lines are looking a little too thick, make sure that you have your line weight turned down to 3. Anytime you make a change here, it's going to continue to be reflected until you change it back. That is a pretty good overview of the line tool. I want to pause here. Does anybody have any questions?
I haven't gotten any so far, so I think we're good to go.
Awesome, cool. Well, let's keep moving then. Next is going to be the wall tool. Now the wall tool is primarily designed for drawing floor plans. There's 2 different modes here. There's continuous and segment mode. Those work exactly the same as they do for regular lines. Continuous mode lets you quickly draw up rooms or structures, for instance. Segment mode is going to let you draw one wall at a time. Now, a couple key differences between lines and walls. So first off, walls, as you can see here, do have a thickness represented in them visually. You can change that by going to wall dimensions or wall properties and then defining a different type of thickness. So if I define a wall thickness of 2 feet, for instance, and then draw that in, it's going to draw a thicker wall. Let's make sure we change that back to 1 feet. Another cool thing you can do with walls is draw up in openings. That is right below here. There is an openings tool. This is going to give you a list of windows and doors you can drop in as required. Let's go ahead and draw in a single door, for instance, and move that into position. So if I drop in a door here, it actually creates an opening that people can, you can see people can pass through. Now, if you want to change an opening size, just select the opening, and then kind of like you can do with walls or distances, you can just tap on this and input in a length or width. It'll change it accordingly. Now, a couple cool more things you can do with walls here is if you go to color, you can define a wall outline color and a wall fill color. Now, by default in ArcSite, when you draw a wall, it's going to have a fill of gray, right? So if you want to have like a white interior fill, like what I'm using, just go to wall colors and change that to white. And that'll, I think, look a little bit better for you. Okay, now back to the opening tool. Let's drop in another single door to demonstrate something else. Now, when you drop an opening into a wall, you're going to have a couple different options here. So at the top here, you see like a little invert tool. That's what I call this. This lets you change how the door opens. So if I select this and then drag my finger around the screen, I can change how that door actually opens. Does it open up to the inside or outside, for instance? Now, there's also a duplicate button here. That works exactly like it does for the other objects we've kind of worked with today. If you press and drag here, you can actually drag openings around the perimeter as required. to create multiple entryways, or you can do the same thing with windows, right? Drop in a single window, and then use the clone button to create a set of windows alongside the perimeter of the wall. So, pretty cool feature. Next on our list is going to be the shape tool. So shapes let you quickly add visual information to a drawing without having to manually recreate every aspect of that shape every single time. So going back to our floor plan example, let's say you have a small room, and now we want to add some more information to this for our purposes. I can go to shapes, type in the name of an object, like tree, for instance, and then just pull up a list of things associated with that name. And then I can simply draw these in wherever I see a tree, right? Your first time using ArcSite and opening up shapes, you're going to bring up the ArcSite basic shape library. I'll back up here so you can see that. And that is a list of commonly used shapes that you can simply drag and drop in wherever you need to. I'm changing the size of this by selecting the control point at the corner and moving my finger around. A whole list of shapes here for all different types of purposes, things like love seats, appliances, AC units. Now, one thing you may not be aware of is that you can actually download additional shape libraries. So if you tap on the ArcSite basic button here at the top, that's going to bring up a list of different shape libraries. Now, your first time doing this is going to look pretty sparse. So if you scroll all the way down, there is a Get More Shapes button over here. And this will bring up a list of all the different shape libraries you can download. We have stuff here relating to our most commonly seen use cases of ArcSite. So we have shapes here that relate to foundation repair, for instance, things for gyms or even fire inspections. There's a whole bunch of stuff here, and if you see anything missing, just let us know, and we'll consider adding in a separate shape library for that use case. Now, one cool thing you can do with shapes is actually create your own custom shapes to use as needed. So to do that, just draw a shape that maybe you can see yourself using quite a bit. In this case, we'll go ahead and draw a circle with maybe a line going through it kind of like this. Let's say that this particular shape represents a manhole, for instance. I can select this object, go to create a shape over on this submenu that appears when you select an item, and then label the shape as, say, a manhole. And then I can click this to the right so it always drops in at the same size. And then if I go to shapes on the right and then navigate to my shapes, all the shapes I've created are going to be right here. So in this case, we can see that specific shape showing up here. I can select it, and ArcSite will drop in that object, and now I can move it around and use it on other drawings or projects as required. So this is a very useful feature that I recommend taking full advantage of. Let's go ahead and delete these objects. All right, next on the agenda would be the fill tool on the right. Fill lets you apply kind of a fill pattern or color to an enclosed area. So in this case, this room is an enclosed area. If I go to fill and then pick internal point, I can tap inside a closed region and it'll fill that with a solid color. There's quite a few options with fill that you can do. So if I go to fill settings, I can also select patterns to fill with. So you can see here there's a series of hatch patterns, concrete patterns, brick patterns, grass patterns, metallic patterns, pavement patterns, roof patterns, water, wood, all sorts of fun stuff. So if I go to, let's say, hatch pattern here, then tap in this internal point, it fills that up with that hatch pattern. Pretty self-explanatory. One thing that's helpful to do when you're using fill, and I typically recommend doing it, is turning your transparency up a little bit. This makes sure that the fill pattern doesn't hide anything you've drawn behind it. So just kind of a useful tip to remember there. Okay, navigating below here to measure. Measure lets you kind of draw different measurements on screen for different use cases. So at the very top, there is a distance measurement. Let's say I needed to have these trees be a certain distance and I need to show that to somebody, I can actually just draw that distance in here. And that would stay on screen. Less useful is the angle measure tool. This lets you define a certain angle. I see a lot of furniture designers using this particular function, but outside of that, I haven't seen much use for it. There is a polygon area tool. This lets you draw a series of points on screen and then measure the interior footage of that advanced polygon. So in this case, this polygon has a square footage of 239 square feet. This takes a bit of practice to use well. So if you mess up your first couple times, don't feel bad, just keep trying. When you're all done drawing, just make sure you hit the screen, or sorry, the blue box here to confirm your measurement. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. There's also a rectangle measure tool. This lets you draw a rectangle on screen and define the internal measurement. And then there is area pick internal point. This functions identically to the pick internal point fill tool. So in this case, if I wanted to know what the square footage was of this room, for instance, I would go to measure, pick internal point, and then just tap on that enclosed room. Then it would tell me, hey, that's 684 square feet. I'm not going to touch on the select boundary one just because I haven't seen anybody use that. So let's move on to annotate and all the wonderful things. Oh, go ahead.
Before we go into annotate, I do have a couple of questions from some of our attendees. The first one had to do with shapes, and Frank's asking, can you share custom shapes with other users?
That is a great question, Frank. So the answer to that is yes. It does depend on your subscription level. So the ability to collaborate with things like shapes and have a shared shape library is included with our ArcSite for Teams build. If you have any questions on the pricing of that, talk to Julia, and we will probably want to connect with you at a later point to kind of fully scope that out. But yes, you can share shape libraries inside company accounts.
Okay. And then my next question is, they're asking if you can measure in linear feet.
Yes, you can. So that goes back to units and precision. So if I go to settings over here at the top right and go to units and precision at the top, I can define my measurement format here. So I can draw it in feet, inches, quarter inches, all the way down to 1/64th of an inch. So as long as you have this set to feet, you'll be drawing in that unit. In this case, I've been drawing in feet the whole time. So those distance measurements are automatically in the metric, or not the metric system, the imperial system.
Okay.
Did that answer the question, Julia?
Yes, it did. I have two more that are a little in the same, but it looks like they're asking is, can you turn this project into a 3D drawing to have a better view?
Great question. So ArcSite is a 2D only drawing platform. However, if you do need to use a 3D program or you want to use ArcSite in collaboration with that, as long as you have a Draw Plus subscription or higher, you can export your drawing out as a DXF or DWG to continue working in other CAD programs, like, for example, Chief Architect or AutoCAD, to kind of build this out as a 3D model. So in ArcSite, you can only draw in 2D, but you can export your work into a 3D program for use there.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's move on to the annotate tool and how to use that. So annotate lets you drop text onto your drawing. So you can use this for really anything, labeling things, pointing out problem areas. To use it, it's very self-explanatory. Just select text, place your finger on the screen where you want to place the text, and then type it in. Now, if you want to get really fancy, guys, with this, or maybe you just hate typing on the iPad, which I do, there is actually a mic option at the lower left-hand side of the keyboard. If you tap on that, you can actually just speak, and the iPad will translate what you're saying into text. So let me give you an example. office. Cool. So now I can just move this into position. And I've labeled this room as the office. Now, when you drop text in like this, it works exactly like a shape. So you can resize it manually, rotate it, duplicate it around, really do whatever you need to. If you want to change the text in your text box, you need to tap on the object twice to bring the keypad back up. So that's an important kind of thing to remember. So that is how you drop a text box. If you want to do a call out, there is a call out button below the text tool in Annotate. That lets you point at something and then drop the text somewhere else. So for instance, I might want to label this as a table, but maybe have the text populate somewhere else. So I can tap on that table, drag my finger away, and then type in the text here. Now this call out is also something that you can select. You're going to notice that there is a random control point right here where the angle changes in that arrow. So if I tap on that and then drag, I can change where that call out actually appears on the drawing. It's kind of a useful thing to remember there. Now, kind of like with lines, you can change how this text visually appears by going to color and styles at the bottom. So you can draw in, you can place text in different colors, as you might see here. One thing you can also do that's pretty interesting is you can have a background color in the text box. So this is most useful for when you are placing text over a photo, and I'm going to get into that in our next point. All right, so the next tool on this little menu is the location-based photo tool. This is a very, very useful feature in ArcSite that I really don't see enough people taking advantage of. This lets you place a photo icon or camera icon on your drawing, and then from your iPad, you can actually take a photo. So I'm going to go ahead and snap a photo of my house. It's a little statue I have in the corner. Now, after you're done with that, you can actually rotate this camera icon to indicate what you were looking at when you took that particular photo, or you can even move this around a little bit. And if you open this up, you can open up your photo and then continue to draw on this. So one of the really cool things you can do inside photos is mark these up with notes. So if I go back to draw at the top right, and then select freehand mode, and then change my color to red, and then turn my line thickness up just a little bit. I can circle things, point things out, maybe draw a little note on here. Now, if you're not happy with the quality of your penmanship, if you're using freehand mode, go back to Annotate, go to Color and Styles, make sure you have your background color turned on, and then you can drop text on like this. Having that background color on and turned to white pretty much has the equivalent of drawing over a piece of tape. So it just really makes that text kind of pop out so it's easy to read. So location-based photos are really useful for inspections. If you're a salesperson and you're using ArcSite, they're also very useful for pointing out problem areas. So let's say you're in the basement of someone's house and you see a really wet corner and you happen to be a basement waterproofer. We'll snap a photo of it using location-based photos, bring it into your canvas, circle the problem, and then if you want to get really fancy, maybe you can even draw in your solution. So basement waterproofers install a lot of perimeter drains on the inside of basements. So you might actually indicate where that perimeter drain is going to go, then mark it up with a note to install the perimeter drain here. A very, very useful tool. Now there are a series of edit functions at the bottom of this toolbar. These are very, I would consider these to be advanced. They are worth experimenting with, but I'm not going to cover them in this particular webinar. If you would like more information on what the edit tool does, I'd recommend visiting our help center at arcsiteapp.com. All right, so that wraps up our discussion on these tools. Julia, does somebody have a question?
Yeah, I think I have one that kind of goes along with that edit function. Nir is asking, are we allowed to add shortcuts to the app, such as 2 fingers to undo?
That is a great question. Now, we don't have the, you're probably getting that from Procreate, I would imagine, which is a art tool. It lets you place or tap 2 fingers on the screen to undo, and then if you tap 3 fingers on the screen, it actually redoes things. We don't have that particular type of functionality in the app. However, there is an undo function at the top of the screen. So if you look over here, there's 2 arrows, one pointing to the left, one pointing to the right. This one is undo, and there is redo over here. So if you make a mistake, just tap up here. Just make sure you don't accidentally click on the name of your drawing over here, or it'll take you out of the drawing and clear your history so you can't undo or redo things.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
I have one more. It kind of goes back to that calculating linear feet of a room. It looks like we had been able to calculate the square footage, but Frank, I think, would like to go over the linear footage once more with you.
Okay. So there's, to place linear footage on your drawing, go to measure, and then go to distance measurement at the very top. Place your finger on the screen, and then you can draw in that distance measurement. So that is purely for explaining, showing those distance measurements for things that are kind of separated from each other. However, if you want to show the dimension of a line or wall or something along those lines, obviously first draw it, then select the object, then go to more on the left, and then click show dimensions. Now I want to make sure we're answering Frank's question. So could you confirm with him that we accomplished that?
Yes. Frank, if you can write in if that has worked for you, can you do that real quick? He's looking, he's asking about the total linear feet of a room.
The total linear feet of a room. So like the square footage or the perimeter measurement?
I would think the perimeter measurement.
Okay. So if you want to look at what the perimeter measurement would be of an object, that is actually something you can do. So I'll do 2 examples here. All right. So let's say you want to know what the perimeter measurement is of this particular room. So you could actually select all the different walls. Oop, I accidentally hit the clone button. Let's undo that. Okay. All right. So what I did here was I went to free select, and then I drew a path through all the different walls. Now, if I click on measure, it'll bring up the total perimeter measurement here at the top right. So this wall has a perimeter of 122 feet. I can do the same thing with lines. So if I select all these lines and go to measure, it'll say, hey, this object has a length of 94 feet. Kind of as a bonus, it gives you the internal square footage. All right. Does that answer Frank's question?
Frank, let me know if that works for you. I do have one more question that came in. Nira's asking, can you also redo the clone button? It looks like it doesn't seem to be working for her. It just moves it. Can you just show her that once more?
Can you redo the clone button? Okay, so the duplicate button is at the bottom after you select an object or group of objects. So it's this little one over here with the 2 boxes and an arrow between them. If you select that and drag your finger, it'll clone that object. So I can also select multiple objects that way and then really do the same thing, just like so.
All right, looks like we are good to go with Frank. And I'll let you know. I think we're good to go for now.
Okay, awesome. A couple more things we'll cover here, folks. So at the top of your screen, kind of to the top right, there's some other tools here. These aren't directly associated with drawing, but they're still very, very useful. So most useful, especially when you're first starting to use ArcSite, is the settings button. So this lets you change things like if there's a grid showing up in the background, what the grid spacing looks like. So right now I have it set at 3 feet, for instance. If I select that and then go to 5 feet, it'll make those boxes quite a bit larger in the background. Now, this is very useful if you're coming from using graph paper or grid paper already for your construction drawings. I would imagine you probably have, typically people will have certain distances associated with the grids on the graph paper. So you can change the grid spacing to reflect that in ArcSite as well. We're going to ignore, I recommend leaving smart dimensioning alone if you're new. There is something useful to kind of be cognizant of here with object snap. So one of the things that makes ArcSite so easy to use when compared to other drawing programs is the way things kind of magically seem to kind of snap together wherever you want. So for instance here, let's say I draw a little box here. I'm dragging my finger across the screen. It snaps when this is flush to that higher line. That's a very useful tool to have. However, if you're finding it get in the way of something, you can always turn object snap off. And now things really won't snap together. And now it's important to remember that this will stay off until you turn it back on. So if you find the program is not really working as well as it was in the past for you, just make sure you have object snap turned back on. If you're using an Apple Pencil, we do have an Apple Pencil mode you can turn on from settings. The way this works, folks, is that it will only, the ArcSite will only select and draw functions. It'll only accept input for those functions from the Apple Pencil if you turn this on. So this allows you to, for instance, rest your hand on the iPad without it drawing something by accident. We also have a laser meter setting here. If you have a Leica laser measure, you can connect that to the app and use that to draw your lines at the exact scale you want. Everything else here is a little too advanced, I think, to cover in today's meeting. So we'll leave the rest of this alone. Now to the right of settings, there is a cloud button over here. You have cloud backup as part of your subscription if you are a Draw Plus subscriber or higher. This is very, very important to use. If you select that button and you have an internet connection, it'll upload all your work to the ArcSite cloud. So let's say you lose your iPad, it breaks, or maybe it gets stolen. Well, if you backed up your work to the ArcSite cloud, now you can re-download your drawings on a different device and pick up where you left off. If you do not back up your work, it will not be saved anywhere other than your iPad. So be sure to use that feature. Now, to the right of the cloud button, we have the export tool that is represented by a box with an arrow pointing up. This allows you to export your work in a number of different file formats. PNG is simply an image. That's what all your photos are saved as when you take a photo from your iPad. We all know what a PDF is. DXF and DWG are both CAD file formats. That would relate to the use case earlier where somebody was asking about seeing things in 3D. If you export as a DXF or DWG, you can open up this drawing in another CAD program and continue your work on a desktop. Now, kind of note with these different export options, the one with the most versatility and options is a PDF. So if we export as a PDF, you can change and tweak a whole lot of stuff here. For instance, I could turn the grid on or off on the export piece, change the line thickness to whatever I want it to be kind of on the fly. The PDF will also include any location-based photos you've taken. And that's an option you can turn on or off here. We take a look at that. We're going to quick look. You can see that those camera icons on the drawing have actually turned red. And if you zoom in, you can see they have little numbers attached to them. So 1 and 2 in this case. If you go to the next page, you're going to see that those location-based photos are actually included in this document. And that includes all your notes and everything. And they are labeled 1 or 2. So you can actually associate where they were taken with these camera icons at the top. So we can see here this little statue picture is labeled 1. we can see that it was taken from this particular point on the drawing. Very, very useful.
I have a couple questions here for you, Noah. It looks like we have someone wondering if we have a language option. In addition to that, when they share their projects, does it go into a file or a normal message?
Great question. So as far as language is concerned, ArcSite currently is only available in 2 languages, English and Chinese. We will probably add more languages down the road, but I can't give anybody a timetable of when that will happen. The language that ArcSite appears in is actually determined by your iPad settings. But unless you have it switched to Chinese, it's always going to show up in English. So yeah, currently we only have those 2 languages, but we are exploring adding future ones down the road. Now, the second part of that question was the export component, right? And like how it appears in someone's files.
Yeah, I think they're asking if it actually it comes as a file, or is it something that, you know, comes through as like a normal message, maybe inputting it into an email or something.
Sure. So let's go ahead and export this out as a PDF, and I'll show you how that works. The export button at the bottom right. That brings up the export screen. This is actually something that Apple has, so we don't have much control or really any control over how this stuff looks. But this is giving us ways to kind of share that PDF that we just created. So I can email this out as an email. If you have a cell phone capable iPad, you can text this PDF to somebody. Or if you want to share it to another Apple device, you can use AirDrop. Kind of cool is, a cool thing you can do here is if you have an AirPrint compatible mobile printer, you can actually use this print tool and print off that PDF right away.
Okay.
All right. Hope that answers that person's question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. So a couple more things you can do with ArcSite, folks. There is a layer tool at the top. This lets you quickly add or hide visual information to your drawing. So let's give you an example of a situation where you might use this just by deleting some stuff here real quick. Okay, that's gone. So let's say in this office, we're going to be installing like an HVAC system, for instance, like maybe some vents for air conditioning. So we can go to layers here and add a layer here for vents. And to add a layer, you just you open up the layer tool and then hit the plus button over here. And we're going to change our draw mode to purple with a thicker line that is semi-transparent. So now what I can do is I can draw in that vent system, wherever those vents are going to go. All right, yeah, looks pretty nice, but depending on who's going to be looking at the drawing, they may or may not need to see where those vents are going to be placed, right? So if I go to layers, I can go to the original layer I created and then hit the light bulb on the vent layer to turn that off. So one of the things we see people doing a lot with the layer tool is they'll type in notes. And they might write in notes that they don't want everybody to see. So they might say, hey, there is a mean dog in here, right? And they don't want the customer to see that they think their dog is mean. So they write that in and on a different layer. Then when it comes time to show the customer, they just turn that information off. Another thing we see people doing with layers is sometimes they'll add like a room or something to an existing floor plan. We'll call this the daycare room. And you know, when it comes time to kind of see what that addition would look like, they'll go to the original layer, turn that off, and then tell the person, hey, we're going to add this daycare room over to the side. Here's what it's going to look like. You can kind of do like a before and after presentation using the layer tool. So a lot you can do with layers, but a very useful tool. This is included with a Draw Plus subscription or higher. It's not included with Draw.
Noah, can you show an example of how you would add another floor via layers?
Sure. Yeah. So you might, okay, that kind of goes back to conceptually, let's delete a couple of these layers. So I'm going to swipe to the left on each layer to delete it. Cool. So now we just have the one layer. Kind of important to do here. The more advanced your layers get, the more easy it is to lose track of information or where it's placed. So be sure to label your layers with their purpose. So in this case, we're going to call this layer the first floor. So what I am going to do now is create a second layer of the second floor. And I'm going to lock this first layer so I don't accidentally select or manipulate something accidentally. And then I can draw in, again, the second floor here. Just tracing over the first floor. Then I'm going to add a room. Then I'm going to go to shapes and add a staircase. Oh, and actually, I'm going to turn off that visual information on the first layer to make this a bit easier. Then drop a tag here that just says second floor. And yeah, now I can switch between these floors kind of as needed and show what's on each one of them. So that's how you might use layers to draw floors. Now, another thing you could do, another way to kind of tackle the floor issue would be to actually have separate drawings for that. So I'm going to go back to the base layer here, turn off that original one. And then I'm going to go back to where you select your drawings. I haven't covered how this works, but this is the drawing page where you can select different drawings to open them up. So one thing you could potentially do here is create like that first floor and label it kind of as such. So go to first floor. Okay. Oh, I forgot to hit save. Rename first floor. And then after I'm done entering that in, I have to hit rename. Okay, cool. So what I could do here is click on this I button, rename it, and then also hit duplicate. Duplicate to the current project. And create a cloned version of that drawing. And now what I could do is relabel this as the second floor. And then delete things that aren't associated with the second floor, for instance, right? And then draw the floor plan here as seen on the second floor. So it's kind of two different ways to tackle that particular problem. You can do it using the layer tool, or you can just create a duplicated version of the original drawing and relabel it as the second floor and tweak it as necessary there.
All right, I think that answers that. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So one more thing you can do here from this menu that I think we want to show people today is you can drop in photos as a background layer. So let's say, for instance, that I'm doing a mock-up of a wall, and I want to be able to draw in maybe like, if I'm going to be doing a gallery or something like that. So I can go to this photo tool at the top right, top right, and then take a photo of the wall. In this case, we'll use the windows. And ArcSite will actually push that onto the canvas. And now I can draw over this kind of as required. I'm going to change the color to red here. And then I could, change this as required. So I could maybe draw in where a painting's going to go. Label this background rectangle as a window. And then when I'm all done with my design, I can go to settings and then turn that background image off. And it's just going to save the work I've done here. So a couple takeaways from that. First off, you can, push background images onto your canvas. The second thing is you can actually use ArcSite for elevation views or bird's eye views. Both will work equally well. All right, so that is pretty much it for the basics of the program. At this point, we're going to be showing you some more advanced tools you can actually use in the program for different use cases. So one of the things you can do in ArcSite that, again, is not immediately apparent is you can use the drawing tools here to actually add information to a drawing and create estimates or reports. So to do that, there is a button here at the top called Products. And if you open this up, it's going to open up a fully customizable list of shapes, line types, and areas that you can draw in. Now, these are differentiated from your regular shapes because anytime you draw something from this menu, ArcSite keeps track of it and tallies it up. Now, there are a lot of uses for this, ranging from creating estimates to doing lighting audits to conducting inspections. Again, everything is fully customizable for your use case. In this case, let's go ahead and pretend we're a foundation repair contractor, and we're going to be placing some piers around a house to help lift it up in certain parts. We can select piers from this menu, drag that associated shape into position, maybe duplicate it a couple times as required. Drop in some wall anchors. Maybe we're doing some flooring work and we want to cover this area with a floor. I can select, let's pretend we're doing vapor barrier here, but that could just as easily be carpet or flooring. I can tap in the inside of this room and the system's going to tell me that's 785 square feet of that particular material. And then I can select these objects. And then if I go into attributes, I can enter in additional information about them. So in this case, with a vapor barrier, I could select from a predefined list of different types of vapor barrier. So if that was carpeting, you could select, for instance, from different types of carpeting. Then if I go to take off an estimate, I can create a legend table. This legend populates with whatever you drop in from products. So if I drop in like a, let's say a dehumidifier, I think I got a dehumidifier saved here. Yeah, there we go. If I drop that in and refresh the legend table, it updates with that new product I dropped in. And then if we go take off an estimate, it'll actually calculate the cost of all this type of work. And in ArcSite, you can export all this information out into a customizable report. That could be something that you hand to a customer to have them sign, for instance, or maybe something you use for internal use. So Products is a really powerful tool that has a lot of functionality inside of it. If you have any questions on this particular function, reach out to Julia and we can schedule a demo to kind of help customize this feature for your use case. Okay, well, I think that wraps up my presentation for today, folks. So if you have any questions, this is a really good time to ask them before we end the meeting.
I haven't gotten any so far, but we can wait a little bit to see if any more come in.
Okay. We'll keep this meeting open for another 5 minutes, folks, so you can ask anything that comes to your mind. In the meantime, I'm just going to be drawing fun little shapes and circles on the app. Maybe I'll give you guys some inspiration.
So we did have one come in, and he's asking if if ArcSite works better with an Apple Pencil, easier or better with an Apple Pencil.
Sure, that's probably something that I can best address with a video. Okay, so I have small hands. You know, it's a blessing or a curse depending on how you look at it. So for myself, anyway, I can draw things and manipulate them very easily just with my fingers. Now, if you have, big old sausage fingers, that's going to be a lot harder to do on touchscreen. So if that's the case, then yeah, I'd recommend picking up an Apple Pencil and using it. Now, Apple Pencils are awesome. They're expensive. They're like $100. So if you're going to be using an Apple Pencil a lot with ArcSite, just make sure you don't lose this. So if you have like a case for your iPad or you're going to be buying one, maybe purchase one with a stylus holder, just so you don't misplace or lose this. I already lost, like my first day using ArcSite on the job, I lost the little tip or the cap to it, for instance. And I had to buy a replacement one for a couple bucks. So you don't want to have that happen to you with the whole object. Get pretty expensive pretty quick. Now, kind of alongside that, sometimes people ask that question because they find themselves accidentally selecting unrelated parts of the project. Like let's say they want to move this wall out of the way, for instance. They try tapping on it with their finger and they accidentally select maybe this area. It's important to remember that you can zoom in or out whenever you need to using this program. So it might be helpful to zoom in, select the object you want, and then zoom out to actually move it. If you're really fluent with ArcSite, you're going to be constantly zooming in and out to select different pieces or draw them in, and then zooming out when you're all done and panning to a different part of the drawing. So you really want to get in the habit of doing that.
I haven't had any more questions come in, so just letting you know.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, I will call